Puerto Rico has a unique tenant screening environment shaped by its civil law legal system, its status as a U.S. territory, and housing market dynamics unlike any state on the mainland. If you're screening tenants in Puerto Rico, you need to understand that while federal laws like FCRA and the Fair Housing Act apply fully, Puerto Rico's local legal framework operates under a civil law tradition derived from Spanish law, which creates a different legal context than the common law system used in the 50 states. Let's start with application fees. Puerto Rico does not have a specific statute capping application fees for tenant screening. The regulatory framework for the landlord-tenant relationship is found primarily in the Puerto Rico Civil Code and various local housing regulations, but these do not address screening fee limits with the specificity found in some mainland states. Landlords can charge reasonable fees to cover the cost of screening, but given Puerto Rico's economic conditions and lower average incomes compared to the mainland, keeping fees affordable is both a practical necessity and a good business practice. Most Puerto Rico landlords charge modest screening fees, typically in the $15 to $35 range, reflecting the local market conditions and the cost of obtaining reports. Charging mainland-level fees in a market with significantly lower average incomes will reduce your applicant pool unnecessarily. Criminal history screening in Puerto Rico is not subject to a local ban-the-box housing law. There are no Puerto Rico-specific restrictions preventing landlords from inquiring about criminal history on the initial application. Landlords can ask about arrests and convictions, and can use criminal history as part of their screening criteria. However, Puerto Rico's legal system handles criminal records differently than many mainland states. Puerto Rico's court system operates in Spanish, and criminal records are maintained through the Puerto Rico Department of Justice. Obtaining accurate criminal history information in Puerto Rico can require using providers who specifically access Puerto Rico court records. Not all mainland screening providers have comprehensive coverage of Puerto Rico's court system. If you're screening applicants who have lived primarily in Puerto Rico, verify that your screening provider has access to Puerto Rico criminal records specifically. HUD's 2016 guidance on criminal history and disparate impact applies in Puerto Rico. Given Puerto Rico's demographics, the territory is virtually entirely Hispanic. Blanket criminal history policies raise particular fair housing concerns. A policy that disproportionately affects Hispanic applicants without legitimate business justification can violate the Fair Housing Act. Puerto Rico landlords should apply criminal history criteria that are proportionate, documented, and consider the nature of the offense, how long ago it occurred, and its relevance to the tenancy. Source of income protection in Puerto Rico is not established through a specific territorial statute comparable to what exists in states like California, Washington, or Vermont. However, Puerto Rico has a significant population that receives federal housing assistance, including housing choice vouchers administered by local public housing agencies, and discrimination based on receipt of public assistance can intersect with other protected categories in ways that create fair housing liability. As a practical matter, a substantial portion of Puerto Rico's rental market involves tenants who receive some form of government assistance. Landlords who refuse to work with voucher holders significantly limit their applicant pool. While participation in the voucher program isn't legally mandated by local law, the market reality in many Puerto Rico communities is that excluding voucher holders means excluding a large portion of available tenants. For credit reports, FCRA applies fully in Puerto Rico. Permissible purpose, written consent, and adverse action notice requirements are identical to the mainland. Puerto Rico residents have credit files with the major bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, just like mainland residents. However, there are practical considerations unique to Puerto Rico's credit environment. Puerto Rico has experienced significant economic challenges, including a long recession, the PROMESA fiscal oversight process, and the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in 2017 and subsequent natural disasters. These economic conditions have affected credit scores across the territory's population. Landlord screening in Puerto Rico may encounter applicants with lower credit scores than they would see in many mainland markets. Not because the applicants are poor risks, but because the territory's economic conditions have broadly impacted credit profiles. Setting credit score thresholds that are calibrated to Puerto Rico's local market conditions rather than importing mainland standards makes practical sense. A credit score that would be concerning in a prosperous mainland suburb may be entirely typical for a reliable, employed tenant in Puerto Rico. Understanding the local credit landscape helps you set realistic criteria that identify genuinely risky applicants without excluding the majority of the available tenant pool. Puerto Rico's fair housing protections operate under both federal law and local provisions. The Federal Fair Housing Act applies fully, prohibiting discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, sex, disability, and familial status. Puerto Rico's own anti-discrimination provisions, found in various sections of the Puerto Rico Civil Code and the Puerto Rico Civil Rights Act, provide additional protections. Puerto Rico prohibits discrimination based on race, color, sex, birth status, social origin or condition, political affiliation, religious or political ideas, age, and disability. The political affiliation protection is notable and unusual. Puerto Rico's political environment is deeply tied to the status question, statehood, commonwealth, or independence, and the major political parties are organized around this question rather than the mainland Democratic-Republican framework. Landlords cannot make screening decisions based on an applicant's political party affiliation or political beliefs. While this rarely comes up in formal screening, landlords should be aware that questions or comments about political affiliation during the application process can create liability. The birth status protection prohibits discrimination based on whether a person was born in or out of wedlock. The social origin or condition protection provides a broad anti-discrimination framework that can be interpreted to cover various socioeconomic factors. From a practical standpoint, Puerto Rico's rental market operates under conditions that are fundamentally different from the mainland. The territory has experienced significant population decline. Hundreds of thousands of residents have migrated to the mainland over the past 2 decades, driven by economic conditions and the aftermath of natural disasters. This population loss has affected rental demand in many communities, though some areas, particularly the San Juan Metro, maintain strong markets. San Juan, the capital and largest city, is the territory's dominant rental market. The San Juan metro area, including Bayamón, Carolina, Guaynabo, Cataño, and Trujillo Alto, contains the majority of Puerto Rico's economic activity. The market is driven by government, healthcare, financial services, including a significant banking sector, tourism, pharmaceuticals, and professional services. San Juan's rental market ranges from luxury condominiums in Condado and Isla Verde to workforce housing across the broader metro area. The Condado, Ocean Park, and Isla Verde neighborhoods have seen significant investment from mainland buyers and remote workers, particularly after the territory enacted tax incentive programs under Acts 20 and 22, now consolidated under Act 60, that attract mainland entrepreneurs and investors with favorable tax treatment. This influx has pushed rents higher in these areas and created a dual market dynamic. High-end properties serving tax incentive migrants and mainland remote workers alongside traditional local market rentals. Ponce, Puerto Rico's second-largest city on the southern coast, has a more affordable market. Mayagüez on the western coast, home to the University of Puerto Rico at Mayagüez, has a university-influenced market. Aguadilla and the northwestern coast have growing tourism-driven markets. The pharmaceutical manufacturing corridor, which includes communities in the central and southern parts of the territory, generates rental demand from workers at major facilities operated by companies like Amgen, AbbVie, Johnson & Johnson, and others. Puerto Rico has one of the largest pharmaceutical manufacturing concentrations in the world. Hurricane risk is a constant factor in Puerto Rico's rental market. The devastating impact of Hurricane Maria in 2017 and subsequent storms has affected housing stock, insurance costs, and tenant expectations. Landlords should maintain adequate insurance and factor disaster risk into their property management strategy. Screening tenants who have been displaced by natural disasters requires sensitivity. An applicant who lost their previous rental to a hurricane may have gaps in rental history that are entirely beyond their control. One best practice for Puerto Rico landlords: ensure your screening provider has specific access to Puerto Rico court records and criminal databases. Not all mainland providers have comprehensive Puerto Rico coverage. Using a provider with incomplete coverage can result in false negatives, missing criminal records that exist in Puerto Rico's system but aren't captured by mainland-only databases. Verify your provider's Puerto Rico coverage before relying on their reports. Another best practice: calibrate your credit score and income requirements to Puerto Rico's local market conditions. Puerto Rico's median household income is significantly lower than the mainland average, and the territory's economic challenges have broadly affected credit profiles. Setting mainland standard thresholds will disqualify a disproportionate number of otherwise reliable applicants. Research comparable rental properties in your specific market area and set criteria that identify genuinely high-risk applicants while keeping your standards realistic for the local economy. A third best practice: if you serve the Act 60 tax incentive market in areas like Condado, be aware that these applicants often have mainland credit profiles, mainland references, and higher income levels, but they may have limited or no Puerto Rico rental history. Having a process for verifying mainland rental history and income for these applicants ensures you can evaluate them effectively. Puerto Rico's security deposit practices are governed by the rental agreement and general civil law principles. There is no specific statutory cap comparable to what exists in many mainland states. Landlords should establish reasonable deposit amounts and clearly document the terms in the lease agreement. For the complete guide to Puerto Rico tenant screening laws, visit tenantscreeningbackgroundcheck.com. Subscribe to our channel for every state in our tenant screening law series.